My name is Orsola De Castro, and I am a recovering fashion designer, a curator, a mentor, a fashion activist. And I'm really delighted to be here today at the Mimar Sinan universities. And thank you so much for inviting me to speak. It's very exciting for me when I have an opportunity to speak to students that have an understanding of fine art, and generally speaking, humanities manual intelligence. And this is actually where I would like to start from, the concept of manual intelligence. I believe that humans made before we intellectualized. We made objects long before we knew how to write poetry. And I think that this is important because it defines us so much. And I also believe that the minute we learned how to make, we also learned how to mend. Anything that we made was made with value and with longevity in mind. Things were precious. So the act of making something last longer is as intrinsic as the act of making it in the first place. And this is what I mean when I say that we employed our manual intelligence. Our hands are fundamental to our survival, and our textiles ourselves, that we adorn ourselves with, speaks not just about our locality, our region, but our impetus, our innovation, and our commitment to the future. Why am I starting so far back? Why am I looking at history? Why will I remind you in a few minutes of several examples where our aesthetics has merged with our principles and our values? And it's because we've lost them. We are forgetting those aesthetic principles, those common sense principles, and the values that have accompanied us for millennia and millennia. And the reason why I remind you that we have forgotten them is that we have forgotten them for a short time. In the great big scheme of history, operating sustainably was the norm. It is only since the Industrial Revolution and recent development in capitalism and human greed that we have all but put to aside the wisdom of millennia and millennia of manual thinking, of community making. And so I want to bring you back to memories, because it is with memories that we can actually enact the most incredible technological innovation that will move us to the future. So my role went from being that of a designer, wanting to recuperate things that I found on the floor in streets, warehouses, or factories, and wanting to recuperate it and bring it back into the future, because I believe that we already have everything that we need. I co-founded a movement called Fashion Revolution. There is a team in Turkey. Please follow them. They're absolutely great. In the realization that the fashion industry has lost control, has lost direction, and there are several ways that we can find that direction back. And they're all linked with respect. Respect for the people who make our clothes, and respect for the resources where the materials that we are making our clothes from are being extracted. Circularity is one of the buzzwords that we are using in order to redefine and reinvent a fashion industry. But circularity is also very much a technical term. It means from fiber to fiber. It means to recuperate a material, making it become pretty much the same as what it was when we began in the first place, in order to reuse it at scale. To this day, circularity is very difficult to achieve when it comes to the panacea we've been given from brands, that it's something that we will enact and we will be able to produce continuously using the same materials at scale. It hasn't happened. We've invested a lot of money in technology, but we have forgotten to invest in people. So going back to the very start of today, talking about how making is eradicated in our DNA, if we had invested 1% of what we invested on recycling, if we had invested on upcycling instead, by now we probably would have structures in order to put that system into place. We would have new job descriptions within manufacturers and within brands, such as creative waste managers or excess engineers. This to say that common sense, our own history, and accuracy are important when it comes to the conversations that we are having around circularity and sustainability in the fashion industry. For me, the most exciting element of founding Fashion Revolution has been precisely that. The understanding that fashion is millions of years old, the understanding that we cannot centralize an industry to the point that we forget whom it really affects, and the understanding that each and every one of us has an opportunity to make those changes at whichever level we are and in whichever position we are within the fashion industry or not. What is your role as students? In my opinion, your role as students is to make the most of the time that you have while you're learning. And I say this very humbly because I am often considered a teacher, and yet I learn more from you students than I ever have from any expert. So I beg of you, for me, do it for me. Keep giving your learning and your experimentation all the time and all the courage that you have. It's very brave to make mistakes, and we don't make anywhere near enough, or we don't celebrate the ones that we make. Mistakes are part of the process that gets us to understanding what is right. If you were to attend any of the fashion industry's conferences on sustainability right now, you would think that for the last 20 years, all of these amazing CEOs and CFOs have done everything right. They just stand on the podium, pat each other on the back and say, look at how much money we've invested on this, and look at how much we've improved on that. None of it is true. The reality is that we haven't gone anywhere near far enough, that we haven't invested anywhere near as much as we need to on people, on supply chain, and on innovation. We keep investing in profits, and profits keep going to the very top, which is why I'm particularly proud to be sitting here talking to you today, because you're not the very top, you're the very bottom. You are the people that will keep walking the walk. You are the people whom eventually will be inside this industry or outside it. But yours is the impetus that will make the changes that we need to see, which is why it's so important to think about people. None of the brands that you see in terms of the mainstream, in airports, at the fashion shows, whether they are super luxury or super cheap, None of these brands have committed to disclosing how much they actually pay their supply chain workers. Now, without dignified pay, nothing else matters. If you pay garment workers a dignified living wage, you are protecting them, you are making their communities thrive, you are ensuring that their children have access to education and healthcare. That in itself shows that you are protecting their environment, which is ultimately the environment that we all share. So that's step number one. It's actually quite simple. If every single brand committed to slashing their marketing budget, to slashing their comms, advertising, fashion show, runway in Brazil, hanging from the Amazon jungle, you know, in whatever temple you want to take it, slash it, pay your workers. Very easy starting point when it comes to the future of the fashion supply chain. A new type of business, a business that doesn't look at aspirations for us, the consumers, but encourages aspirations and an aspirationable life for the people who make our clothes. Now, how do I link this to circularity and everything else that we spoke about before? It's one word, and that word is respect. I mean, potentially the one technology that we have never considered as people is that of treating each other as equals with equity and respect. So if we had made friends rather than conquered, learned from each other rather than impose our views, perhaps we would have a more holistic approach to industry by now. This is the only change that I see worthwhile in the future. Respecting people means respecting our resources. When it comes to sustainability, I have really explored every possible angle, from being a designer upcycling clothes to being a curator for other designers using sustainable techniques, to being a fashion activist out on the streets protesting for a fairer industry. And at the end of the day, what I do believe matters the most to me is understanding that this is no rocket science, and that in order to move forward, a lot of the times we have to look back. So when I think of circularity, for instance, this buzzword, I look at it from an aesthetic point of view. I mean, you show me art that doesn't take into consideration found objects. I mean, I could go back to Braque and Picasso. I could go even further back to wabi-sabi in Japan and kintsugi, the art of mending with gold, in order to preserve the mistake. But aesthetically, those of us who are interested in arts and crafts, we are interested in reusing. We take comfort from our own life repeated. I mean, at least in the UK, so many of the trendiest restaurants look like they've been decorated with objects that were found in the bin. It's a trendy look because we understand it. And this is important to me, that we focus on a form of technology that corresponds to our values and our instincts as people. And here it's where I close my little loop with words rather than with my usual crochet needle, which is normally what I use for closing loops. But my point is this. And The best technology, the technology that we understand, reconnects us with things that we do understand in the first place. So in terms of sustainability, let's look at the two biggest buzzwords. Now, one, as I mentioned, is circularity, but sustainability in itself has been used the wrong way. What about the word transparency? We have the technology. I just have to put my 1 second. The best technology is the technology that connects us to things that we understand. I can bring you two examples from right now, the circularity concept and the transparency concept. If you look at technologies such as blockchain, which is related to public disclosure and traceability of materials, it sounds almost like science fiction these days, that via technology you will be able to log all of the stages of production, but that's completely normal when it comes to ancient supply chains. We need to know where things come from because that informs our opinion. A few examples. When I was growing up in the 1970s, when I was a child in Italy, you would never have bought a pair of Converse that weren't made in the US. I mean, they would have simply been fake. Or when we think of tailoring, I mean, the best tailoring comes from the UK, but the softest wools come from Italy. So these are not science fiction, technological things that we need to press in order to. These are basic informations that as humans, as citizens, we have always required in order to make our conscious decisions. They simply have been eradicated for the last 30 years or so because it was very convenient for those people running those incredibly profitable businesses to ensure that we didn't give a damn anymore about the provenance of objects or the traceability of materials. Let's give a damn again. Let's ensure in order to force the fashion industry to publicly disclose their practices. Now, transparency might not lead you to sustainability or best practice, but it leads you to scrutiny. And scrutiny is where we're at, scrutinizing brands to ensure that we are buying the best product possible. If we don't have the information to make that choice, to buy the best product possible, do not buy the product. Same with circularity. We are the first or maybe the second generation that is not responsible for our own waste. That's wrong. In the past, clothes would be passed on, food would be used for animals or for leftovers or be put into the garden. We are not responsible for our own waste. We should be. Everything you own is yours, meaning that you are responsible for the end of life. It is brands that have removed that responsibility from us in order to make us buy more. And I'm going to leave you with one thought, well, maybe two. But the first thought is all clothes are made to be repaired, even the cheapest, even the ones that are made by the cheapest of brands and cost nothing. It is their responsibility to make affordable repairs available for their customers. It is your responsibility to buy, own, keep. You're young enough to understand that you can make that change now. You buy to keep. You can buy cheap, but you have to buy to keep. So if your H&M skirt breaks down, trust me, it's not so badly made that you have to throw it away. It's so simply made that it's going to be extremely simple to repair. this industry is in your hands as much as it is in mine. Whether you operate within or without, whether you decide to be a clog in the machine, that's a wonderful choice to make, by the way, if you choose to be a clog in the machine. When one clog doesn't work, the machine is unfunctional. When clogs are well oiled and working in collaborations, machines run smoothly. Be that well-oiled clog, together with all of the other well-oiled clogs next to you. Don't ever understate the importance of people in brands and your roles from within. The bigger you grow within whichever institution you are employed by, the more your influence will grow, and the more you will be able to work with people that share your values and principles. If you decide to operate from without, be the mine, make mistakes, be brave and patient. It's not going to be easy. And yet again, don't do anything alone. There's too many people for the single individual. Look at how our body works. Not one cell operates independently from the others. I've done nothing alone. Everything with people I trust. Coalesce, make groups. There is strength in numbers. And unfortunately, we need the numbers to defy the current culture. I don't think I have anything else to say. I really thank you for listening, for being here. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to take them now. And for those of you in here who come from the industry, I know that it is a very different scenario when you're working within, particularly taking into consideration the different levels within the fashion industry and the textile industry. So my response to this is I work frequently with the industry. I have done so in Sri Lanka, in Italy, and I understand first and foremost that the strength of the industry, the strength of any brand, any manufacturer, are its people. And that for the people who do work in the industry, sometimes the changes seems phenomenally huge and almost impossible to put into practice. It's always a marriage between what you do in your own home and what you do in your place of work. If you are committed to making changes because you believe that the future of your children and of the planet actually depends on those changes being made, it doesn't matter where you start at the point of making them. It could be your wardrobe just as much as it could be your desk. And the most important thing is not to be daunted, but to attempt. This is why I say that it is so important to make mistakes. Sustainability is a new science, and our behavior within sustainability is almost completely unpioneered when it comes to present day life and the difficulties that we face within present day life. Mass production, mass consumption, a culture that really somehow puts well-being next to how much we own. This culture is going to change. This culture is going to catch up with whoever works in the industry, because one is unsustainable. Two, have you ever been on TikTok? Because the TikTok generation is waking up with very different values. They are buying clothes and selling clothes, not because they're trying to be more sustainable, but because the clothes that they wear mean very little for them. This is what we've done. We've somehow made fashion less important by making too much of it. So wherever you are in the industry, you play an incredibly important part. At whichever point, sure, if you're a CEO or a CFO, you actually have the power to make changes from tomorrow morning, and for those changes to be 100% meaningful and to improve instantly the lives of all of your employees. But you are highly unlikely to do that. My experience is that the higher you are, the more in power you are, the more, unfortunately, your bank balance will dictate your operations. But if you are not at the top of the industry, then your discourse, your dialogue, your ideas can infect everyone else around you. My suggestion is that you join up with others in your place of work that share your values. You might be interested in the economic side, in the social side. Join, form, make a group that discusses how best for you to be organized, unionized, how best for you to approach the concept of pay, fair pay, living wages, which are the organizations and the unions that can help you achieve that. Organization is paramount within the fashion industry. And if your company does not allow unionization and organization, then that's their problem, and one that you very definitely need to address. Fashion Revolution will always speak about organization and collective bargaining before living wages, before everything else, as the absolute bare minimum when it comes to working within the industry. If you are more interested in environmental concerns, again, form a group, have lunchtime meetings, scrutinize your company and your supply chain, and see if within your sphere of understanding and power, there is something else that you can introduce. The reality is that there is an enormous amount of information out there, which is almost deliberately kept scattered, so it's not so easy to access. Prepare to spend some time. Time is the most forgotten word in today's industry. Knowledge is the only tool and the only weapon to actually undermine a greenwash, and knowledge is the only tool and the only weapon to start making changes. Now, the one thing I have to really, really, really strongly recommend is that you focus on one word, and that word, well, maybe two: small and slow. You probably will not find them in the fashion dictionary. And yet the future is small and slow, because small can be bigger than anything else. The biggest organism on earth is made of little bits. And there is a fantastic quote from designer Thomas Lomé that says, "The next big thing is lots of small things."
Great. Thank you so much, Orsola, for being with us and sharing all this life-changing words of you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and I'm so sorry I can't be there exactly on the day, but it's wonderful to be here today.